Hi, welcome to Section 3, Handrails and Bleachers. In the last section, we discussed how to create this basic structure. While I was away, I constructed the exits, the area underneath the bleachers, and I extended a platform on the east bleachers. In this next section, we're going to be covering populating these stands. The first thing I'm going to do is assign a new hotkey. I really like being able to maximize the viewport using the space bar because that's how we do it in Maya. So now that we've got that, I'm going to start on the handicap section. I looked up online and it said that handrails were typically 3 feet. I want to double check that though. So I'm going to create a rectangle, set the height to 3 feet, snap it to the floor here, and then I'm going to take a biped. We find that in the Create tool, Systems, Biped. Drag from the floor until it says 5 feet 6 inches, because that's about how high I am. And as you can see, that's just about the right height for the hand to go. This is going to be the handicap section though, so these people are going to be sitting behind the bleachers, so let's just put him in a seated position and see how that looks. And it looks like he has perfect fillability over the seat, so we're just going to continue with 3 feet. Now I'm going to show you a technique that is typically very useful, but pretty bad for creating rails. We're going to be making our rails around this handicap section, so I'm just going to hide everything that we're not going to be seeing. Now since our railings are going to be the same length as this, I'm just going to create a plane that's snapped to that length automatically. We want to set our height to 3. We're going to have 4 sections, so that's set correctly, and then 2 rails, one at the top and one at the middle. So we're going to have 2 length segments. Let's just snap it up here, convert to editable poly, and bring our sides in. Now that we've got our poly model exactly how we would want our railings, let's select the edges that we want to create a rail out of and hit Create Shape from Selection. We want it on linear in this case, and let's just name it. And if we delete our poly model, we see that we have a spline in this shape. If we hit Enable in Viewport, we see that we suddenly have a rail. Now this looks pretty good. The problematic point is that we always have too many vertices in here. We don't really need all this, and it's going to look kind of funky in the rendering, because as you can see, there's this joint here. If we bring it over, where is that connected? See, this isn't correct. So, this technique is very useful if you're creating, say, one rail that comes over here, or if there's a variety of cases in which I've found that to be very useful. But we're just going to go back in time until we had our poly model. I'm going to leave this poly model we made just for the sake of snapping. So let's go in here and freeze these guys, and we want to make sure that freeze snapping is acceptable. So we go in here to our snapping tool, go to Options, and just make sure that Snap to Frozen Objects is selected. If you've got too many frozen objects in your scene and you don't want to snap to them, you can turn that off. Now let's go to Spline Modeling, hit Rectangle, and just make a rectangle that goes for this entire length. I'm going to go in here, create editable spline, go to our second spline tool, and then detach that. Now I'm going to go into our spline modeling, go to line, unselect this, which will make it attached to our previous shape that is selected. And I'm just going to bring it down here. And I'm going to make another one that goes over here. Now we've quickly made a spline, and the reason this one is superior to the last one is that I'm going to hit Control Q. That's going to make this one go into poly mode. Let's make this just a foot so we can see it. The reason for that is that you see we don't have any weird joint errors. There's only one connection point here and one connection point here, and this goes all the way across. If we bring that lower, it's going to look good no matter what size we have. So whenever we're making rails, we always want to create it in this fashion. Let's go in and give this 6 sides and a width of 2 inches. 6, not 100. Let's also turn off auto smooth. What this does, as you can see, is it gives a smoothing to the polygons. So what we want is for this top spline to continue along this edge here. So I'm going to go in, select this, and just detach it. Well, let's do that to both sides since we want it to be mirrored. And detach. So now we can go in and from a front perspective, just using that technique I showed you earlier, line, turn off that so it stays in the same shape that this one is in. Go in and grab that. Let's take this and copy it over to the other side. Go into your welding mode, or I'm sorry, your vertex mode, and then weld it. Now we can go in and attach those lines we just detached. So now it's going to follow this edge here, and this is going to remain the same. Let's do the same thing. Go in and create a line that goes from here to here, and copy it over. As you can see, I forgot to turn off create new line, so it made a new line. So let's just go into this original shape, attach it, and then name it. So now we've got this railing, but it's right up against the side. I want to bring it in just a little bit, and I want it to be in proportion to itself. So I'm going to unfreeze all so that we can see this a little bit better. My right click will click. There we go. Unfreeze all. Select our rail, hit FFD 2x2x2, which is found under your modifier list if you don't have it hotkeyed up to here. Select this, which will automatically take you to your control points, and then let's just take it down. We want to be the same from every single side, so let's take it down by 2 inches. See how that looks. That looks pretty good. So let's do 2 inches on all sides. Y, 2 inches, and X, and the positive value, 2 inches. So now that that's finished, we can go ahead and collapse this modifier. Collapse all. If you've got multiple objects in the multiplier, say a normal and a UV map, and you want to kill the normal but not the UV map, you would just go in here and click collapse 2. That would collapse it down to this while keeping everything above. Whereas if you hit collapse all, it just flattens everything. Let's go in here and delete those. I'm going to go off tangent for a bit here. In a lot of sports stadiums I've seen, the bleachers will go all the way around and there will be multiple levels to it. This is a high school football stadium, so it's not the case, but we're just going to pretend it is for a minute. I've gone ahead and created this line which circles the entire field. In the case of a football stadium where it would circumvent the entire field, we would typically go in here, find our first row, hit Alt-L, which will loop, which would then move the spline all the way around, and then we would create a spline shape from our selection. Not necessary in this case, as it doesn't loop, so I just made one myself. Let's go to the front viewport and just make a spline which will go through the center aisle. A lot of times in these major sports stadiums, there will be handrails that go up into these aisles. Like I said, it's not the case here, but we're just going to pretend. Alright, I'm going to go off on a side tangent for a little bit and tell you about the spacing tool. In typical stadiums, you would see the bleachers wrapping around the entire stadium. This was only built to accommodate a high school, so there's going to be a lot less accommodations there. If we were going to be modeling for something like that, typically you would see handrails in the middle of these aisles. That's not the case here, but I'm just going to build some for the sake of showing you how to do it. So let's go into our rectangle, snap to these center points, make sure our height is at 3 feet, and then snap it up. Let's turn this into an editable spline. Turn that off for now. Bring this down. As you can see, this is on a Bezier curve. We fix this by selecting the vertices and selecting corner. Let's go in and delete this. Go here, create our line, turn off start new shape, and just snap to these center points. It's not snapping there, so I'm just going to go in and snap it manually. Okay, so let's enable this renderer. Let's make it about 3 inches so that it's visible but not obnoxious. And move this over to the center point of one of these stairs. So we've got that. Let's just make a few more for the sake of illustrating this purpose. Good. So now what we want to do is move our pivot point. I'm going to move it down to here, and I'll show you why in a few seconds. We want to put our pivot point right on the edge of this stair. So if it's going to be right in the middle of this top line here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose our spacing tool. If you look it up under the Customize User Interface, Spacing tool, we can see that it's assigned to the hotkey of Shift-I. So let's just hit that to bring it up. We're going to hit Pick Points and come over here and select these 2 points right here. That's going to create a row. As you can see, it disappeared the instant I clicked out of it. If I click in the spacing tool again, they reappear. These aren't going to become manifest into actuality until we hit the Apply button. If we increase our count, well, you can't see it. Yes, so we select this, increase the count. That's going to increase the amount that's coming up. But we just want to turn that off so we get 1 row. Let's make sure that's an instance. Whenever we're dealing with splines in a scene, we want to make sure they're all instanced. That way if we change one, we change all of them. And hit Apply. Now they exist. So let's just go through and do that for the rest of the spaces. If we were doing it on a stadium that wrapped around, we would obviously go all the way around. I'm just going to do this a few times to illustrate the point, since we're going to be deleting them anyway. The second useful aspect of the spacing tool, I'm just going to grab the leg off one of these. Oh, just to illustrate the point of instancing, say we want to make these rounded edges. Let's go up here and hit a fillet on this guy, and fillet the corner. Now, all of them that's been applied to, even the one that's not selected to. Since we really want uniformity, that's really important. There's way too many polys in here, so let's go to interpolation and bring that down. That's going to increase or decrease the amount of spaces we have when we do something on a Bezier curve. I think just taking it to 1 or 2 steps is going to be just fine for our purposes.